Good morning, everybody. We're going to start in about 2 minutes. We just had a couple of people that are not connecting. Okay, so I'm just going to resend a link to a couple of people, and then we will start in about 2 minutes. Right, good morning, everybody. Sorry about that slight delayed start. We just had a couple of people that were picking up a link from a previous webinar, so we just updated everybody on the latest one. So even those of you that are probably on already will just get a second email from me very quickly. Right then, so we're going to get started today. As you probably know, today we're going to be focusing on a follow-up webinar to what we did last time around, so last Monday, which was aimed at new users. Today we're going to go into the slightly confusingly named Teams section of Microsoft Teams. So this is all about now adding some structure into your teams and collaborating with people either in departments or on projects or all these sort of things, which we're going to cover. So I'm joined today by Tony Pearson, by Andy. I've just checked that everything's working. Tony, are you there? Can you hear me and can you speak okay?
I can, Phil, thank you. Good morning, everybody.
And Andy, are you there as well?
Yeah, all good. Good morning, everyone.
Brilliant, lovely. Okay, so like I say, my name's Phil Denham. I'm the commercial director here at HPP in Cameron. So I'm going to kind of intro today, and I'm going to try and answer some questions. Ask Tony some questions as we go along. If you were in our session last week, you'll know we had a few kind of technical issues around there just to being able to communicate, but we think we've resolved that now, so that should be absolutely fine. Tony then, who's the ops director, will be covering the demonstration today, and we'll be guiding you through how to do some of these key things in the Teams section of Teams. And then Andy is going to keep his eye on the Q&A as we go along. So you should have a little Q&A button, which is the icon's like a little speech bubble with a question mark in it. Feel free to populate that as we go along. We're going to pick them all up at the end verbally, but Andy will answer anything he can as we go along as well. We're around about, I think it's 20 to 30 seconds ahead of you. There's a bit of a delay when you do these things to help with bandwidth and coverage and things like that. So we'll pick them up as soon as we can. And Andy, who's going to be doing that, has been really instrumental in setting up Teams at HPP in Cameron. So we've been using it around about 18 months now. Obviously, with what's happened over the last few weeks, our usage has shot through the roof as well, as I'm sure yours has. So he will be able to kind of guide you on some quick answers. If there's anything more technical or specific to your setup of Teams, we'll either pick that up afterwards, or obviously if you're an existing HPP or Cameron customer, we'll put those through to the support team. We'll be able to log a call for you and fix anything that maybe isn't working as you expect it to. Okay, so just a quick one as people join. obviously if you can hear me, this is pretty irrelevant to you, but if you give the people that can't hear me, I'd just like to put this little thing up so that people can connect their headphones or turn their speakers on. And we are recording this as well, so you'll be able to watch this again and share it as you go. So just as a quick overview, the Teams functionality in Teams is what Tony's going to cover today, but it is really important to have a think about how you're going to use this yourself. So we can do a demonstration, we can show you some best practices of it, but this is really moving now into a bit of a software implementation for your business. So it does need some thought process about how it can be used, and we urge you to do that. Or they can jump in and have a play with it before you roll it out across your whole organization. Really have a think about the best way to use this section of Microsoft Teams. We are recording it, like I say, so you'll be able to share this with anyone that you want to talk to about it afterwards. And from our side of things at HBP and Cameron, we primarily use this on a department by department basis. So we have a setup for each department, and that allows us to have focused chats, shared documents, updates, all in one place for those people that work together on a regular basis. So for example, in the marketing team, we have a section for each of our products that we do some marketing for, that shares links to important files. We link our OneNotes into there so we can have our notes from meetings and things, and then all of our reports go in there as well. And we even use the workload planner section of Teams as well to schedule, assign and sign off tasks as they go. And like I say, Tony's going to cover some more of that as we go along. So in terms of what we are going to cover, Tony's going to cover how the setup of these things, so creating the teams and the channels that sit within each team, how you then manage those teams and channels, files and collaborating on files within those teams, how the notification process works, and also going to cover some best practice as well at the end of it. So I think we've got pretty much everyone signed on now by the looks of things. So I will now hand over to Tony. So if Tony will very shortly just take over control of the screen and take over control of the presenting.
Thank you, Phil. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Just one thing we wanted to pick up on, Phil touched on it there regarding audio. We did have a lot of questions last time regarding audio and feedback. You will notice you may get feedback on Teams, and this is purely to do with if there's a bit of a lag on somebody that you're in a conference with. The easiest way to combat that is just to use headphones instead of your speakers in the machine. That way it doesn't get feedback through the mic, and it will combat that quite quickly. So just a bit of a tip there if it does happen. Just one other tip as well, if you're not using Windows 10, which I hope everybody is, some of the functionality I'm going to show you today will only work in either Chrome or Edge. So if you happen to be using IE as a default browser anywhere, you would want to change that, because some of the files and some of the SharePoint stuff I'm going to show you shortly, you may have a slight issue with. So just a couple of notes there. Okay, so we're going to dive into Teams. So Teams itself, obviously, as we touched on last week, was all around chat, video calling. What we're going to move on to now is the Teams element of Teams. So it's kind of its namesake. And there's three kind of key pillars that Teams will allow you to do within the business. One is around collaboration. So to collaborate with teams, again, remember, inside and outside your organization. Another way to use it is as a dashboard. So if you've got new people coming into the business and want to publish things to them, so when they log in the morning, they have everything that they need to do their day-to-day job, you can do that as a dashboard. There are some limitations around that, which we'll touch on, but that's another way you can use it. And obviously the communication element. So we heavily focused on the chat and the live meetings, but obviously within the team itself, as Phil said, this allows you to bring a bit more structure to that collaboration. And it's also massively customizable as well. So as you'll see, you can customize this for teams within your organization, or just customize it for yourself. I will touch on this again at the end, but it is one thing to consider, and Phil again mentioned it in his opening lines there, is have a think about how you are actually going to deploy this and how you're going to use it within the organization. Teams out the box with no changes to the administration side. really means everything I'm going to show you today, anybody can do it within your organisation. So what you could end up with is departments and people creating their own teams, and you could end up with far too many channels of communication, really with no control over that. And you can limit it, you can stop it at an administration level, so you can stop people creating teams and channels, of which I'll show you a bit on it here, but it is really, before it starts to get out of control, it's really worth considering how we're going to do that. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. So we focused on the chat last week, so we're now going to go into the teams element of things. And what you can see here, this is a simple layout. So it shows me the teams I can see and the teams I'm members of, and any hidden teams. So at any point in time, I can hide a team, so it gets it out of my mainstream view to declutter it from there. And you can also see here all the teams I'm a member of, and there's a post in here that I haven't read yet within that team. So what I'm initially going to do is show you how to create a team. So simply to create a team, I can click join or create a team at the bottom here, and it presents me with this here. So it allows me to do three things. I can join any teams I can see within my organisation I'm not already a member of. So there's a couple of teams here. I can also join a team with a code that can be given to me also. But what I want to do, I want to create a brand new team. I don't want to join a team. So I simply click create a team here, and it gives me two options. So I can either build a team from scratch, so setting that up from scratch itself, or I can create it from an existing 365 team. What that enables me to do, if I create it from an existing team, is it will copy the settings from another team, and the settings it will copy over are any applications, membership and settings. As you'll see later, the things it doesn't copy over are any files or any previous content in there. So if there's been chats going on there or any files in that team, it will not copy those over. But what I'm going to do today, I'm just going to build a team from scratch, and it gives me the option to make this private or public. If I make it private, it means I have to invite people to that team, and I can control permissions over that. If I make it public, it will display here in this list. So these two teams here are public teams. It means anybody can join them at any time. So you really haven't got any control over that. I'm just going to make it public because we're just doing a test team, and if I simply call it test, put a bit more of a description in the box there, and I can click create. And what it will go away and do now, it will create that team, and as you can see, it's as simple as that. It's now created that team, and it allows me to add any people into that team that I want to add in at this point in time. Obviously, I can do this later on if I want to, but at this point in time, I'm just going to add fill in. Click add. It also gives me a drop down at this point in time, so I can by default it defaults to member, so it will make Phil a member of that team so we can communicate and collaborate. I can also make him an owner of that team, and him being an owner, he has elevated permissions on that team from there. So I've added him in and click close, and as you can see, it's created a team called test here. What it's also done is created a channel. So within a team, you have channels. Now, as default, within Microsoft Teams, it creates a general channel of which you can't delete and you cannot rename either. So that is the default channel that's created. You can create multiple channels, which we'll come on to later. There are some hard limits around this within Teams at the moment. So you can create only 250 teams per person and 200 channels per team. There are some further restrictions around private channels within Teams, which we'll touch on later, but there's just one thing to bear in mind of those limits, which again goes back to thinking about how we're going to roll out Teams itself. So once the team's created, I can simply click on the breadcrumbs here, and I can manage the team. And within that team, it will show me who is part of the team. So it'll show me an owners section and a members section. And if I wanted to upgrade Phil's permissions, I can simply do that in there and make him now an owner. And as you see, he'll pop up to the top there. I can also click here as well, and I can on the three breadcrumbs at the top, and I can go to edit the team, and I can rename it if I want to. I can also change the status of that team or the privacy of that team to be public or private. So I can switch between the two if I want to from there. I'll come back to the channels tab in a second. And if I go to the settings, then this is where the bulk of the settings are for the team. So I can upgrade the image, so I can put some nice images on there. By default, it just puts first 2 letters of the team in there. I can do further permissions around this team. So there's a good few things to note in here. We can do this at administration level on your tenancy, but if you create a team itself, you can stop people doing certain things. And some of the things you might want to not allow members to do is to create and update channels, create private channels, and delete private channels are quite common ones. So if you've created a team for your business and you only want members to be able to interact with that team and not create channels within that team, delete channels and so forth, you have the ability to do that. And as you can see, there's a clear section of all the other permissions within there as well. There are some other settings, a bit more in depth. You can turn the emojis and gifs off if you want to. I think what we are seeing is this day and age, people are leaving those on to try and add a bit of fun to the team. There are some analytics on the team, so you can see how people have interacted with the team as well. Obviously, this is a brand new team, so there's nothing in there at the moment, but it does give you a bit of an insight of who's using it throughout a period that you can filter on at the top. And then apps, it will show the apps that are part of that team, which I will come on to later. So that's kind of the basic settings of a team. And as we say, within a team, we then have channels. To create a channel, all I need to do is click the breadcrumbs, press add channel, and I can call this a channel. So I could call this operations team within there and give it a further description. And again, within here, I can set the privacy level. Now, this is relatively new to Teams. So previously in Teams, if you were a member of the team, you could see any channel and you would have the access that you would be given at the top level, whether that be owner or member, and that would permeate down to the channels. What you're able to do now is set the channel as private. That means at that level, you can set permissions to that channel. So you could have a team with 10 people in, but you only wanted a subsequent channel, one channel where the management were in there. You could set that to private and then only have management accessing that area. But for this moment in time, we'll leave it as standard and we'll click add. And what it's going to do, it's going to add that channel on there. So I've now got an operations team channel. So what I can also do within here as well, I can amend the channel notifications, which I'll come on to later. But say I'd create that channel for my team and I didn't want to see it as in my list every day, I can simply click hide and it will go to italics, and when I next refresh that, it will have hidden that team. To bring it back, that channel. To bring it back, I could simply do show if I wanted to bring that back from there. So we can simply bring that in and out of view from there. You can also do the same with teams as well. So if I wanted to hide this team, I can simply press hide on this team and it will go into my hidden teams section. Again, I can leave a team if I want to leave a team. So if I'd created a team, I can still leave it. Or if I'd been added to a team by somebody else, by the management of that team, as we saw earlier, I can simply leave that team as well from there if I wanted to. There is a delete team option, so only the owners can do that. A bit of a warning on that: if you do delete the team, it will delete all the data in there, and unless you're backing teams up, you're not going to be able to get that back. So just be careful if you do decide to delete that team as to what the impact will be on the business from there. Okay, so I'm going to flip to my demo site. So this is my demo team here. You'll see a few things. I've got a few channels in here. So we've got the general channel, which we mentioned earlier. You can see also I've got a private channel with a little padlock on there. So that's showing me that's private. Now I have permissions to that, and I can obviously do what I want to do in there. If you were a member of the team and you didn't have permissions to that channel, you just simply would not see that channel from there. And I've got another channel here, which we're going to be focusing on today, and you'll see I've got a hidden one. So I've hidden one, so you can see kind of how it all fits together from that perspective. So if I go into my test channel, this is the ones we were using last week at the webinar. So there's a bit of information in here already, but as you can see, I can do varying different things in here. So one of the really key things Teams is really good for is sharing files. So along the top, you'll notice that there's some tabs. If I go into the Files tab, you'll see I've got a file and a folder in here. So these are files and folders. Now, anybody in the team can see these. The only way you can stop people seeing files within a team is if you make a channel private. It creates a brand new Teams SharePoint site, and then only the people that have permission to that private channel can see that. But if I was to put a file in the test channel, anybody in the general channel could see it if they click on the open SharePoint link, which I'll show you in a second. So there's just one thing to bear in mind there from a permissions perspective. At a team level, you have to put files in private if you didn't want anybody to see them outside the people that are part of that private channel. So what I can do in here, if I want to create a bit of a folder structure, I've got an option to do new folder. So I can create folder 3 within there, and it will create a folder very, well, exactly the same as you'd be used to on your PC from there. I can also create a brand new file from here as well. So if I wanted to create a brand new Word document, let's call it test 4, I can create a brand new Word document from within here as well, and it will just pop Word online, and I can type a few notes in here, and then I can simply press back, and it will have created that test 4 document within here. And I can basically structure this exactly the same as I would do if it was on OneDrive or SharePoint. This is actually a SharePoint library. If I click open in SharePoint here, what you'll notice, it'll open it directly in SharePoint with the same structure that you would have within SharePoint itself. If I expand that. The other good thing you can do with files, if you are offline and you're on a train, or well, you're not going to train now, will you? But if you were traveling or maybe had a bad internet connection, you can simply click the sync option. And for those of you that are familiar with OneDrive, it will sync all those documents out of that team to my OneDrive. I can then obviously access them online when I offline, and when I come back online again, it will sync those documents back to the team. So that's quite useful if you are in and out of an area where you don't have a particular good signal. It does give you that functionality as well. If you wanted to migrate files to SharePoint, to Teams, you might have a huge amount of files you want to copy up there. There are varying different ways you can bring files up there. I could simply click the upload option and pick a file I wanted to upload to this team. So I can do that in this case, and it will upload that file. As you can see, it's uploaded that to there. If you've got a lot of files and folders that you want to upload, and you don't want to click upload every single time, and you don't want to be able to, because you'd have to go into the folder and upload it into the folder and so forth, it can get a bit messy and certainly long-winded. You can simply open this in SharePoint. And then for anybody who's familiar with SharePoint, you can just simply do the drag and drop feature within here. So if I wanted to drag that folder 2 over, I can simply drag that up into my Teams. This could be bulk files, and as you can see, it's uploading that data now within Teams. And if I go back into Teams and just come out and go back in, we should see that folder in a second is now uploaded. So, and it would have the structure in there of the 2 documents previously. So that's a useful way of getting them up to SharePoint, to Teams. When I'm in the team as well, so I've uploaded those files, but I might want some of my colleagues to work on that file and to let them know it's there. So if I click the little paperclip down here in the bottom, I can browse the team, and I might want this test document for here. So I can share the link with the people in my team. File, press enter, and that will now share that document with everybody in here. And what this then allows us to do is to collaborate. So if I double click on that file, what it's going to do is open it in Word again, and I can update this file. What I can also do is if I turn on conversation here in the top right, press conversation, I can then put a note in here to say updated file, post that. I can then come out of this document, and what it's done is it's updated that document, but it's also put my note on there. And anybody can do that within the team. So then if Phil was working on this document, he could put his updated notes and he could write a comment as to what he's done on there. It will also here as well, if there was multiple people on this document, it would have my initials here to say I've done that. If Phil then added his notes, it would have his initials here, and I would see up here little pictures, the little avatars of everybody to show me who's working on that document at that moment in time. Now, that's really useful for collaborating on Word, Excel, PowerPoint documents all at the same time. Now, one other thing I might want to do is I might want to yes, mate.
Chip in there. That's something that's been really useful for us. When you combine that with voice call or video call, then that's great, because actually you can have that conversation at exactly the same time. So you can combine that collaboration on documents with a live conversation as well, which is really the difference then between just having a shared OneDrive or SharePoint document, isn't it, that's kind of being fired back and forth. It can be a very live and collaborative way of working on a document.
Yes, I think that is it. This is hugely powerful, and this is why it's the best way to share documents, because we can share them within files here, and I've still got the same functionality. So I could go into this welcome document here, I could go into it, and I would still have the same functionality as I've just seen from there. And we could communicate on it. If Phil was in this document, I would see him up here. But there's nowhere to share this conversation. So although you could have a live conversation at that moment in time, because it's not on a post within the team, it does mean you would lose that collaboration around that document from there. So yeah, it is hugely powerful when everybody's working from home, different locations. It's hugely powerful to be able to collaborate from there. So we've shared a document through there. Now, one thing you might want to do is you might want to share a folder. So you might want to say, here's all the documents to do with this project, or here's all the documents to do with the management accounts. So if I go back into files and do copy link and copy that link over, what I can do is if I go into a post here, and if you remember, we can use the advanced post option and paste that in, you'll see it goes purple. Now, the problem is if I post that in, it doesn't really mean anything to anybody. It's just a bit of rubbish. But what I can do, if I click it so it highlights it purple and click this little chain link here, what it'll allow me to do is to give it a meaningful name. So folder with all documents for team in there. I can press insert and I can post that. And what I'll have now is a meaningful link on there, which I can click and it will take me straight to that folder. Otherwise, if you do it the other way, it's just a meaningless link from there. And again, we can communicate on that. So if you do hi Phil, great box, or whatever we wanted to do, we can collaborate and communicate around that. Now, there are some sort of etiquette things around Teams, and I suppose it depends how you want to use it in your organisation, but try and get people to reply within the conversation thread, because if I put great work here, Phil, it is disparate, then it's not linked into that chat, and it can get a bit messy and it could get lost, because as you can imagine, this keeps going up and up and up, and the more things I post in there. So it's about getting people to collaborate and communicate on that particular post from there. And if you remember last time, obviously within here as well, team members, I can do the meet now if I wanted to do a meeting now, or I can schedule a meeting in from there, if all of you remember that. Now, the one thing in here that it doesn't do at the moment, I know this is a request from Microsoft, you would think if I did meet now and did that, it would invite everybody that's in that team to the meeting, but it doesn't. So it's just me in there. What it does, it gives you the suggestions and suggests people that are within the team that you might want to invite to that call, and all I have to do is click and ask to join. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't invite those people automatically to that call. They would see it. So as here, when we create a test schedule meeting, you would see it there. And here's one I did earlier, where it will show you that there was one active 8 seconds ago. And people could join it. They would see it's there within the team and they could join it, but they wouldn't automatically ring them. So I know that's on a request for Microsoft to address that, because I think that's quite powerful if you could do that from there. Okay, so the files element within here I think is hugely powerful, and what we're seeing at the moment is people migrating files, certainly off local premise servers to SharePoint, or just simply getting them into Teams, which technically uploads them to SharePoint anyway, and we can collaborate on there. one key thing on here, if you are moving your files from local storage, server storage that was previously backed up, make sure you're backing up your Teams data or your SharePoint data. The last thing you want to do is have the next 3 months working remotely and have all your data in here and then a file go missing or a file get lost. Microsoft do say it's your responsibility for your data. Although it's unlikely to go missing, it could do, and you just need to bear that in mind. So please do make sure you consider backing up the data as well.
Just to add to that, Tone, that is a common misconception, isn't it, around things like OneDrive, in that I've got my online copy and I've got my local copy, but that doesn't mean I've got a backup, does it? Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. I mean, yes, you could have 2 copies, but there have been instances, certainly we've seen with emails and a few times with OneDrive, where it gets confused, doesn't know which is the master document, and then wipes them both out. So that can happen. But yes, you technically have 2 copies, but neither of them are a backup, and we would strongly recommend you have some sort of Office 365 backup if you adopted 365 in any way, shape or form.
And that is a separate backup service, isn't it? To say your standard. If you're still using on-premise for other things, this is a separate backup service.
That's correct. Yes, yes. One thing I've opened on screen here, if you were watching there, so I went into the files, opening SharePoint again. You do have the version history. So as you do in SharePoint, you do have the version history option. So all you simply need to do is open the folder in SharePoint, click the breadcrumbs again, and version history, and this gives you the ability, if I wanted to roll it back to that particular file from the 27th, I could simply roll that file back. So if 2 people have been collaborating, maybe made some mistakes on that, and we want to roll it back, we do still have the full version history that you're used to within SharePoint. So there is that as an option. That's not a backup, but it does give the ability to roll back if you need to. Okay, so files hugely powerful within Teams. So the next thing I want to cover is sort of the next big area. We mentioned about dashboards earlier, but what you can do, you can bring a bit of a dashboard into your team. So we've obviously got the chat, we've obviously got the files element, but then we've got all these other tabs across the top. Now, as default, if we go back to this general team here, you'll notice as default, you only get posts, files and wiki. Posts and files you can't remove. Wiki you can, if you don't want it, you can click the down arrow and remove that if you wanted to get rid of the wiki from there. But as default, you can only have you have to have those two tabs. But what you'll notice, I've got a few more across the top. So we've got meeting notes. So that's created automatically. If you remember last time, when I have a meeting and we have an online meeting and we go to the notes tab, within that team, it brings the meeting notes in there. So I can simply see any meeting notes that have happened within that team at that time. And then obviously the wiki is used for information. Can be used in many different ways. An example here is if we've got a team and when we get to go back to site and the site visit information that they have to do certain things, then you can put static information in here. You could use it for meeting notes if you're doing a meeting through there. You could use it for anything. It is a simple OneNote. It's a simple note way of noting down information that you can share and collaborate within that team. How you use that is really down to you. Any of these other ones, though, are manually added in. So the questionnaires, projects, website, and so forth, they're all manually added in. Now, a good one to notice is this test file here. So the one thing I didn't show you previously. So if I wanted a tab with a file in, so it could be a sales forecast document, it could be a production Excel sheet that we want everybody to see. Within files here, if I go back to the files and say this document here, if I click the breadcrumbs again, I can make this a tab. And what it will do, it will make that document a tab. So it's easily accessible to everybody. So I wouldn't have to go through my posts and find it. I wouldn't have to go through my files and find it. I can simply go along the top and I can see this document there. Now, we'll call it what the document's called, but I can rename it and give it a friendly name. So site document, so in there, and I can click save, and now that will call that document. I can do that for Word, I can do it for Excel, I can do it for PowerPoint, and that document then will be there. We can collaborate on that document, so it's just opened it the way I showed you earlier. So you can see there's somebody else in that document, AP, from there. So I can update that document. And again, I've got the comments option, so I can turn the comments on down here as well. So I've got the full collaboration that I had before, but it makes it really, really easy to get to that document. We're constantly updating, or we're constantly accessing all the time.
Right,
so that's it.
Tone, probably just worth showing that again, because that was pretty fast even for me as a user. So that might be worth just going through that as well, because that's
absolutely no problem.
Those tabs.
So if I'm in the Files tab here, I can simply pick a document. So I want to pick a different one, go into my folder 2, and if I hit the breadcrumbs, what I can do, I can make this a tab. So if I press make this a tab, that document will become a tab along the top here. As we said, we can rename that. So I can call that test doc, press save, and then it's got a meaningful name along the top, and everybody can collaborate and work on that document in exactly the same way as we showed earlier with the comments section. If we want to turn on comments, those comments would stay on this file, and we can collaborate and work together. It's a really good way if you've got 4 or 5 key documents within your organization of collaborating on them and working on them together. Okay, so some of the other tabs I've got along the top just as examples of things I can add in. So for this one, I've got a questionnaire. So I might want to get a questionnaire out to people within the business. We're all remote at the moment. It might be a time to gather some information about people's well-being, or something that something we need some feedback on. So what we've simply done here, and giving you an example here, is we've used Microsoft Forms. So Forms been another 365 product, and we've simply added this tab into here with some questions on. So anyone that's familiar with Microsoft Forms, it's a real straightforward way. We can put questions in there, we can have multiple choice, we can have open questions and feedback from there. So it's a really nice way of embedding things into Teams. And I'll show you how you do that in a second. Just want to give you some examples. The other thing that we can embed in as well as an idea, and we use this internally, and Phil alluded to using this within the marketing team, we can integrate projects. So we can integrate, Phil, what's it called? My mind's gone blank. Planner, sorry, we can integrate Planner into Teams. So Planner being another Microsoft product, and we can integrate that into the team, and then we could assign tasks and to varying different people. So anyone again who's used Planner, I can simply create a task in here, build desk. I can set a due date on that, and I can assign it to a person that's in that team, and I can add that task. And we can see if there's any tasks overdue. So you can see there's a couple of tasks overdue for myself in here. And anyone that's familiar with Planner, you can create a bucket in there as well. So the idea is that you can add and you can really customize this. Another example is you could add your website in there.
Can I just quickly on Planner, Tone, just because that is quite I know it's a separate kind of product in Microsoft as well. That is one for really people to use who are used to using products like Basecamp or Asana. It's not quite as feature rich as those products, but if you're primarily using those products to manage a team's workload, like I say, marketing is generally where we use it internally, then the actual functionality of assigning a job, having a conversation within that job, uploading a file into that job can all be done as well. We're not going to be able to cover Planner in depth at the moment on this webinar or such, but again, a quick search for Microsoft Planner will just talk you through how that works in order to manage workloads internally. So it's really good. We love it, but it's like one of those ones where it's almost like another webinar if you wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. What I was trying to sort of get across is that you can really customize and embed things in here, and the way you do that is click this little plus symbol at the top and add tab. They're all tabs across the top. But what it allows me to do is to add many things in there. Now you'll see you've kind of got your standard stuff in here. So I've got SharePoint, I have got Planner, and I've got OneNote and Forms, as I've mentioned earlier. I can drop just simple Word into there. I can drop a website into there. So these are the things we've kind of touched on already. I can have another wiki page because I could have as many wiki pages as I wanted. But also I can add in third-party applications, and as you can see, there is loads and loads of third-party applications in there, and this is growing day by day. So you may see some things you're familiar with. There's Jira in here, there's Ansara in here, as Phil mentioned earlier. So there's absolutely loads and loads of third party, and you've got some other ones like Trello, Yammer, Flow, and so forth. So you can add in third-party applications. Once you add it in, it'll just ask you to sign into that application, and then it'll be available for you. Now, if you've added that to part of a team, so remember, this is a team, and everybody can see that. If somebody else in your team doesn't have an account for that application, they obviously couldn't log in unless it's publicly available. But what it allows you to do, it allows you to give you that dashboard feel, and it's really good for new starters. So if the majority of things, or if all the applications you're using in your business are in that list, or they're web-based, like our sales team, for argument's sake, our CRM systems web-based, our price books web-based, all our credit safe applications are all web-based. So you could create a dashboard for your team where they've got everything they need in there, and rather than you having to go into Internet Explorer and set default web pages, etc., which if it changes, you'd have to go in and change it. You can simply create a Teams dashboard for everybody to use, and you could update it on the fly on a daily basis. Not only can you collaborate, as we've seen from the posts and the files, but then you create a customized dashboard for people to be able to log in and see everything they need to do their daily job. It does really, really work very well, and it gives you a lot of control over that. Certainly for new starters, we find it extremely useful. In each department, they have their own dashboard, so they can get to the knowledge base articles, they can get to the Bible, which is in OneNote. If there's any tasks assigned, they can go and do that through Planner. Obviously, as we saw earlier, the questionnaire thing. So we can add loads and loads of different things in. Like we said, the key thing is it's either got to be on that application list, it's got to be a files or folders size type of thing, or it has to be a web-based application for it to work. So it has to be fully web-based because it's going to open it up through a web browser through there. So they're the kind of the stipulations from there. Now, as Phil said.
So no, just jump in. I know we normally say Q&A to the end, but you're in the right place for this one. We've just had a question in about what would work well for a frequently asked questions section within the team, and I would imagine that's where the wiki would come in quite handy straight away. Absolutely, yeah. So if it's question Q&A, you could obviously create a wiki for it from there, and as you can see, you've got top page. I know this is called Untitled, but you could call it questions for the operations team, and then you could have subsections in there, and you could fill this out as you go. If you wanted something slightly more complex and more in depth, you could use OneNote, but I think for what you've mentioned there, the wiki page would absolutely be ideal for that. And obviously we could rename it and call it what we want to call it at the top, so it has a bit more relevance to the channel itself, or to the information. But that would work really well for that. Yes, Phil. Okay, that could be a massive section, and we could do another hour session on that itself, but the idea was I wanted to give you a few ideas of how you could customize it and how you could work that along the top, with some applications that you may be familiar with Planner, and certainly the form side of things from there. So just finally, before we go on to best practices, just want to touch on notifications. So notification wise, you can see obviously I've got a pop up here. There's a few ways I can go into notifications. So my standard notifications, if I click my icon in the top corner here and I go into settings, I've got my notifications button here. We did touch on this briefly last time, but as you can see, you've got customizable notifications for meetings, for channels, for messages. So it is worth going through here and having a look through and customizing this to your needs. What you don't want to do is you don't want to introduce Teams, you don't want to introduce chat, and then have it email you every time somebody's done something or mentioned you in it, because the idea of this is to reduce email. So you really want to think about these settings within here and the notifications. So it's worth looking through that and customizing that to your need. You can also within here as well on the channel side of things, you've got channel notifications as well. So as default they're off, but you can turn them on from there, and you can turn it on through channel mentions, and you've also got the reset to defaults if you want to. So you do have the options to look at the notifications at those levels as well if you want to.
One thing I didn't mention earlier, which I had on my list to go through, was you can email a channel as well. So if you've got information you want to get into the channel, but you might not want somebody to be a member of that channel, or it might be updates from a supplier or something like that. If I click the breadcrumbs and get email address, this is why you should never do live demos. It will give the email address for that channel. You can then email that channel and it would pop up in the feed. So if it was an attachment, it would pop up in a post saying it came from this email. So it's quite useful. I have seen people use it for getting information into channels from third parties. It might be a price guide update. Rather than it going to the sales team, just email the channel, give them that email address, and then it'll populate in from there. Okay, so that kind of covers the Teams element thing off. One thing I just want to finally wrap up on is best practices. So giving you a very whistle-stop tour, as you can imagine, there is a lot to take in there, but wanted to give you a whistle-stop tour. The key points I think you should take away from this in consideration is you need to keep it simple. It's great to go in there and create teams for everybody, channels for everybody. But if you've got too many teams, too many channels, it's too much information for people to take in. It's very difficult for people to find the information that they need. So keep it simple. Keep it down to the bare minimum that you can get away with. Keep the teams down to the bare minimum. Keep the channels down to the bare minimum. And think who wants to be able to communicate within that channel, who wants to share that information. Remember, you do have the limits of 250 teams and 200 channels at the moment. I would hope that you wouldn't get near those, but there is those to bear in mind as well. And think before we embark on this journey at an administration level, what do we want people to be able to do? Do we want everybody in the organisation to be able to create teams? Do we want everybody in the organisation to be able to create channels? Do we want those teams and channels to be external? Or do we want them to be able to communicate with customers and suppliers? Remember, everything we've shown you today, we can be internal or external of the organisation. So it's really worth thinking at an admin level, what do I want people to do? Do I only want managers and directors to create teams? Do I only want directors to be able to make them externally facing? Really need to think about that, because out the box default, everybody can do everything pretty much, and that's inviting external people, internal people. So it's really worth thinking about. And as I say, don't go mad, just think about what you can use it in your business. It's hugely powerful, and at times like this I think there's a lot of benefits into to using Teams in the way we've shown you here, but don't go mad. So that's it from me. So I'm just going to hand back over to Phil, and I think then we'll go into a Q&A.
I'll just add one more thing on that, because obviously we've been through this journey ourselves, and one of the things that I think is very tempting to do is to set up a team for almost everything and not make use of the channels. So by default, that general channel is in there, and it threw us to begin with because we almost weren't using that. So if you think of, if you are going to have a department, let's say your project implementation department, then that general channel is where that chat is going to go on, or those files are going to go on, that's going to affect everybody. Within that, we can then have separate channels for specific projects or anything else that relates to a few amount of people along the way. So therefore, those communications can be separated within the channels themselves, and the general channel can still be used then to communicate to everybody. I think one of our mistakes straight away was setting up a separate team for every one of those projects, and then just having effectively lots of general channels in all of them, which ends up everything gets very cluttered. You end up with lots and lots of teams. No one quite knows where to go. So that thought process of exactly where do I need to kind of communicate with lots of people, and then how can I use my channels to separate those individual conversations has been really important for us. So I think that's probably the main thing to add there from my side of things.
Yeah, and I'm happy to recover everything. I appreciate it's a very fast-paced, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but as you can imagine, there's a lot to go through from there. And what I wanted to try and do is give you a bit of an overview of everything. But obviously, we can pick those up in the Q&A, and we can also do future more in-depth sessions if you want to feedback on what you'd maybe like to see, what you'd maybe like us to go over. Then we're going to be doing another team session next week, so we can incorporate some of those questions in there as well.
Yeah. Okay. I think, Tone, maybe rather than flicking back to my my deck, if you leave your screen on, because I think some of the Q&As might just just be good to almost show people as well.
Absolutely.
If Andy's there, I know Andy's been looking at them, so might have a bit of an order if we want to go through them in. Did you want to pick up some of those Q&As, Andy, and just run through a few of them?
Yeah, so one of the people was asking basically, can you clarify the difference between a team and a channel? If you just go over that, Tony.
Yeah, so as you can see here, a team can be pretty much anything, I suppose, from that perspective. You could have a team that is your entire organisation, so you could have the organisation being the team, and then the channel being the department. Or you could have, as we've got here, you could have the department being the team, and then channels within that installation team, IT project portals and things like that. It really is just a means of structuring the communication. It is a way of segregating off. Does that make sense, Phil? Is that the way you think you'd explain it?
Yeah, just so in a practical term, if we stick with departments again, and maybe a similar example of what I've just talked about, let's say we're a business that's got 10 customers, then we might have a team set up for our installations department, and then a channel set up for each customer. So within that channel, we can have a conversation specifically about what's happening with that customer and maybe their project. But we can still use that team to communicate to everybody in that team, so all the people that are involved in all the projects. But the individual conversations about each customer would take place in that channel. You could replicate that same structure then maybe into your sales department and have obviously separate conversations that relate to the sales team in each of those channels as well. But then you're communicating with the sales guys. So the top level is really who wants to be communicated to at an overall level. And then the channels are used to break down the individual specific conversations or projects. And obviously you can then add in different tabs on each channel as well. So you can have a link to a different customer report, say, for example, on each channel relating to that specific customer. So you can see that channel that Tony's bringing up there is blank, but that one has got loads of information. So those tabs can be different on every single channel. The team is very much the placeholder for that. So yes, we can do our big high level stuff there, and we can do our high level communication. But what we want to be doing is drilling into the channels when we're having more specific conversation. Like Tony said, don't go too far too quickly with it though. And you might actually start with teams and a general channel only to begin with, and then start adding in extra channels as you feel relevant.
Yeah, what you can't do at team level is obviously at team level, I don't have anything. I have to have a channel to have all these tabs here. So at team level, it's just like a holder for everything. And then obviously when I drill into the channels, I see these tabs across the top.
It is what I think. Am I right in saying, Tony, the permissions are based at team level though, unless the channel's private?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So as in, if I then have, for example, so I use this with some of my sales guys. So I have their individual meetings that we have with them, so I can see obviously their own forecast and all of that side of things. I don't set that up as one big team because otherwise everyone would be able to see everyone else's details there. I do have a team per person, but that means that I can create a tab, for example, for their section of our CRM system, for their specific Excel documents that track their performance, etc. So that's one way that I use the teams separately to control the permissions around it. But if it was something that I would be happy for anyone to see, then I could just have the channels to do that, no problem whatsoever.
Okay, thank you guys. The next question I've got is, if 2 or 3 people are working on a collaborative document, e.g. Word, that's been uploaded from a shared drive, is the document also updated on the shared drive, or does it have to be resaved?
Okay, very good question. So once you've uploaded a document into Teams, it is in Teams, you're editing it within Teams. If you wanted it to go back to the shared drive, you would have to manually download that document from Teams and save it back into the shared drive. I suppose probably would want to think, well, why would you want to keep it on the shared drive? Once it's in Teams, you've obviously got all that great collaboration features and functions, so why would you want to put it back on the shared drive? But no, you'd have to manually do that if you wanted to then to update the document that was on the shared drive.
Is that still true, Tone, if the document originated from SharePoint?
If the document was on SharePoint and you've linked it into here, then it would update it from a crossover. So one thing we didn't show is linking a SharePoint library in, but I could link a SharePoint library in here and have the documents in a traditional SharePoint manner. And if that was the case and it was on SharePoint, then yes, it would update it on SharePoint. But if it was on a shared drive, then no, it wouldn't.
Right, okay, thank you. The next question I've got here is about whiteboards, which I think we had some issues on previously. So can you add whiteboards as a tab? Also, can you use share whiteboards while on a video call? Now, I think on this one, there was some limitations about whiteboards where you had to have at least 3 people in a meeting to be able to actually add a whiteboard. And I don't believe you can actually add them into team channels anymore.
I don't think you can add them as a tab. No, it's in team channels. I think we just need to clarify that, as Andy said. And yes, you do need a minimum of 3. The other stipulation on whiteboard as well is that it must be Windows 10 machines. So there is that. Now you can download the whiteboard application from the Microsoft 365 area. So in the top left hand corner, if you're in SharePoint and you see the breadcrumbs that are in a square, if you click that, you can download the full whiteboard app, which does give you some more functionality, but I don't believe you can embed it in Teams as a tab along the top, to my knowledge anyway.
I think I'll clarify this. I think it's on the roadmap to do. They turned this off a couple of weeks ago, didn't they? Completely whiteboards, just because of obviously everyone suddenly using Teams massively. But I think I've seen that the whiteboard functionality is coming if it isn't there already, because they are rolling out a lot of stuff at the moment. So I think the answer is no for now, but it will be shortly.
Okay, right. The last question I've got at the moment, unless anyone else wants to post any more, is can we just have a go over Teams licensing, comparing the free version to the paid one? And obviously, there is a free version available, and just clarify the differences between them.
Yeah, well, as far as I'm aware, Microsoft are giving away free Teams licensing at the moment. I'm not aware that it is hugely different to the standard one. Teams comes in most of the Microsoft packages, and what we'll do at the end of this, we will post clarification of which Office 365 packages you get Teams in. But Microsoft are giving away Teams free at the moment. It was on the link from the useful information from last time, so we can share that with you from there. To my knowledge, the only thing you don't get in the standard Teams is obviously the voice communication. So if you wanted to start using Teams as a phone system, or wanted meetings with numbers in, you would have to buy the bolt-on package for that. But my understanding is Teams is Teams, whether it's the free version that Microsoft are giving away free at the moment, or the paid in your subscription, then it's the same functionality as far as I'm aware, unless you know any different, Andy.
Yeah, I know of a couple of other differences as well. They shouldn't affect many people. One of them's around users, so I think it's capped at about 300-ish on the free version. And storage as well. Obviously, there's a lot of storage included in the paid versions, and that is limited. I think it's around about 1 gig per user, 10 gig for shared.
Yeah, I think
like
it's 2 gig per
2
user
gigs.
and 10 gig of shared storage.
Shared, yeah. And like I said, I think there's some limitations there around like recording calls and audio calls and all of that sort of stuff. But in terms of the functionality we've gone through today around the Teams, I don't think, to my knowledge, anything we've covered today isn't covered in the free version. What we obviously don't know is how long this free version is going to, 1, stay free, or 2, stay as kind of feature rich as it is, because this was announced at the beginning of everything related to COVID-19. So it's kind of like make use of it now, get used to it, but be aware that they may change that in the future. Dare I say it, when things get back to normal.
Yeah, I mean, what you could do if you were worried about storage limitations and you had SharePoint already, you could simply click the plus and add a document library in from SharePoint. So if you've got SharePoint already with those documents on, you could simply link that in. So you could use a SharePoint link, copy the SharePoint link from the repository that you want, copy it in there, and that's going to then use your SharePoint storage rather than obviously storage within Teams. So you could get around it that way if you're already using SharePoint.
I think the other question that came up in the Q&A, which I answered earlier whilst Tony was presenting, was about recordings of these webinars. So I have published a link in the Q&A. I know we sent it round for anyone that attended last week as well, of last week's webinar recording. So that is available on the HPP and Cameron websites now. We obviously are recording this one right now, so at the end of it, it takes a little while just to download it all, get it all uploaded and put it on the website. But the plan is to have that ready for this afternoon. So we'll just send an email around to everyone, either on this webinar who registered for this webinar, with the details of the actual recording itself, so you can share that, you can watch it again. As Tone said, there's a lot of information in these, and if you're new to it, I appreciate some of it can be a bit quick and a bit fast, but then you can watch it at your leisure and digest that as you need to as well.
I think we've just got another question just come in quickly. Do you have to have Office 365 to use Teams? Can you have Teams if you have an on-premise Exchange?
Yes, you can. So you don't have to have the full Office 365. You can use Teams as its own, and I do believe the version of Microsoft they're giving away at the moment is just Teams. So no, you don't have to. Some of the features, depending on what version of Office you're running locally, may or may not work to the same degree. And certainly some of the online editing that we showed you within the online versions of Word, obviously you might have some of those features that won't work because obviously you haven't got the online version of Word and Excel. But overall, I suppose that in short, yes, it will work, but you would have limited functionality. I think there's a final question from Chris. Asking if we're going to continue to do these weekly. Yes, we have got one planned for next Monday as well. So for the foreseeable, we're going to keep them going. We're going to be doing 5 top tips from each of us next week. So if anybody has anything specific they'd like us to cover, we can do that as well. But hopefully everybody has found it useful. I appreciate, as Phil said, there's a lot to take in on this section. But yes, we are going to be doing further sessions next week.
Yeah, I think the plan is next week. We've obviously gone through a lot of basic functionality. There's some pretty cool little things in there that save time, make kind of easier use of the system, which we've been getting used to. So I know a couple of mine will be around saving posts and some of the quick searches that are available, which I want to cover, and we're all going to pick a few that we're going to cover together. I am literally chucking this one out there right now to Tony and Andy because we haven't discussed this, but I do wonder, I appreciate the audience will be a lot smaller for this one, whether there's any interest in sort of an admin session around this as well, because we've touched a little bit on the admin, and I know a lot of the questions we get are around you kind of need to go and change your settings in the background to allow that, or that possibly is blocked by your administrator. So I appreciate that won't be a big audience thing, but we could look at running maybe an admin section and
absolutely
admin course as well for those guys that are looking after their own tenancies and want to have a look at it, or even just to see what's available if we look after your Office 365 for you and you want to see what the options are and how we can either lock stuff down or allow stuff, including external users and stuff like that, then that might be a little one we could run as well.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem on that at all. We just had a final question. I think Andy's responding to this. How to add your calendar. Now, Teams is the calendar here. In Teams is your Outlook calendar, so they are the same one. So you should see your Outlook calendar in Teams and your Teams calendar in Outlook because it's the same thing. Obviously, if you are having any problems regarding that, Andy's got a link I'm sure he'll be posting to you shortly, that can just run through that. But they are one in the same calendar. It's not 2 separate calendars, so you don't have to add it in.
Again, I don't know if that is true or not, Toby. Is that potentially one that you could lock down as an admin if you wanted to? I'm not sure why you would, but if someone hasn't got it, that could be something someone's locked down either by mistake.
Yeah, you can remove all the tabs as well. So all the tabs that you're seeing on the left-hand side, they can all be customized for everyone. So it's just basically a policy-based thing that you can just change if the calendar is visible or not for people. Same with the Teams and chat. You can hide those apps as well, or add additional ones. If you want everyone to actually have a specific tab, like the calls, for example, you can add that in so everyone is forced to see that.
Brilliant. Well, we're getting some nice comments, so thank you very much for those that have found it informative. Like I say, we'll share this recording, no problem whatsoever. So feel free to watch it again or share it around wherever you want. I'll drop an email to everybody. It's going to come from the announcements email that I've been using to keep you all informed of login details. So keep an eye out for that. And that will have the links to this webinar. I'll include the one from last week as well, just in case you missed that. And also details of the one next week. Now, I think we normally run these on Mondays, but I'm not sure if it's relevant anymore, but it's actually Bank Holiday Monday next weekend. I don't know if anyone's remembered that, but so I've scheduled it in at the moment for Tuesday at 11 AM again, just in case people are, I was going to say, doing something on their Easter Bank Holiday Monday, or maybe not doing something on their Easter Bank Holiday would probably be more accurate. So we'll just roll that one over to Tuesday, so you can hopefully have a little bit of a rest from all this madness.
Well, maybe should have had it on a Tuesday and called it Teams Tuesday, Phil. Anyway,
maybe, yeah. There you go. There you go. The rebrand starts next week.
Okay, there's another question come in. Can you move teams in another team as a channel? Not at the moment, no. You can't do that. So you can't move a channel from one team to another. You can obviously copy a team, which would copy the channels over, but it would only copy the settings, the users, and obviously the apps. It wouldn't copy any of the content over from there.
Yeah, we had this problem or challenge ourselves, didn't we, actually, because we when we first launched, we had a bit of a eureka moment maybe halfway through our implementation, when we can do this better. And that was one of the challenges we faced, in that almost everything we'd done, we had to archive off a little bit into hidden so that it was still there should we need it. But you couldn't then take that exact content or the chat and the existing kind of conversation and move it over into a new one, which is another reason just to kind of think about things and consider what the best setup is for you, and don't go crazy straight away, because you will learn as you do this, and you will work out how it works for you best. I think in our experience, we kind of started at a management level first, so we kind of started creating a directors team, so that we could then have our kind of director meeting details in there in terms of what was going on. Then we encouraged our managers to start doing that, and then we started rolling it out almost department by department, so that we didn't make any crazy mistakes straight away and then end up rolling them out to everybody. So it is a case of start where you think you're going to get the highest level of engagement and feedback, and then roll out from there.
I think that's it. Had somebody reply, say Tuesdays is better, so that's cool. Fine.
And admin tutorial will be good as well, yeah. So
just got another question in as well. It's about the dates, that's fine. So good. If you can't make
those dates, those Tuesdays, we will record every single one of these. If you can't make the dates that we're booking them on, just register. You don't need to turn up, it's absolutely fine, and I'll include you then on all the recordings that we do. So just register even though you're not going to turn up. That's absolutely fine, it's no problem. We're still going to run these, and then I will send the links to everyone that's registered, whether they attended or not. So hopefully that helps if you can't make either Mondays or Tuesdays, or you've got other people in your organisation that can't make those days.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for the time.
Cool.
And enjoy the rest of your day.
Yep, lovely. Thank you, everybody.